Well, we're so happy tonight to be gathering again for our virtual toy collectors chat. And we got a very special topic this evening, Lincoln Toys. And tonight we're going to talk about the history of the Lincoln Toy Company down in the Windsor, Tilbury, Ontario area. And Doug Dan is with us this evening. He's done a lot of homework on this. And so good to see Joe Ertl and Doug Harke here, and some others who are big Lincoln toy collectors. So we're going to have a really good session, I think. Next week, or 2 weeks from tonight, we'll have another Lincoln program, which will be more with photos of the various Lincoln products. So tonight is going to be mostly Doug sharing the history of the Lincoln Toy Company as he knows it and has researched it. And then 2 weeks from tonight, we'll have photos of the products they provided. So so glad of you to do this, Doug. I know you put a lot of time and effort into it. So we'll just let you carry on. And then afterwards, we'll have a discussion and Q&A period. So welcome and thanks for doing this.
Okay, thanks, Doug. And thanks for asking me to do it. I apologize this took longer than I had hoped, but I hope everyone finds this interesting. I need to point out first that I'm the messenger tonight. This information I've gathered is exists out there between toy collectors and on the web, and so I don't profess to be an expert in Lincoln toy history, and I just want to point it out, but I gladly share what we rounded up. And the origins of the Lincoln Toy Specialty Company was greatly shaped and influenced by the World War II era. And interestingly, that's similar as to the story with the Ertl family and the Ertl Company. And Joe is on tonight, and I'm sure he can relate to that statement I just made. So Lincoln had a similar situation here with the influence of the World War II. And as I go through this history, you'll see what I mean by that further. The formation and operational structure of Lincoln Toys was the idea of a family last name Kimberly. The Kimberly family lived in the Windsor area, and for the benefit of our U.S. friends on here tonight, and there's several of them, it appears, welcome. But Windsor, the city of Windsor, is across the river from Detroit, Michigan. And as you're all aware of, Detroit's famous for cars, and so isn't Windsor. That auto industry from day one till currently, Detroit and Windsor are linked closely together, and you're going to see that tonight as I present some of this history. There's history I'm not going to share. I'm tending to keep this information focused more specific to the Lincoln toy, and so keep that in mind. It's very important to note right now that the Kimberly family was behind Lincoln Toys, but it's important to note there's several people and different companies were a part of the operational support structure of Lincoln Toys and Lincoln Specialties over the years. I found that a bit of a surprise in doing this research. I didn't know so many companies and people were behind what we all call Lincoln Toys, and you'll hear more of that story too. First, I want to acknowledge, before I get into the history, there's various sources of information I'm using tonight in this presentation, and I'd be remiss if I didn't note these sources. I'm going to do it right now. A lot of information has come from a man by the name of David Gray from Metcalfe, Ontario. It appears back in the 90s he did extensive work on the background of Lincoln Toys and Lincoln Specialties, and I'm relying on a lot of information that he put together. Other sources was Collectors Weekly, Walkerville Times, which was a newspaper in the Windsor area, also the historymuseum.ca, History Museum of Canada, and also information from the Canadian Toy Collector Society, which David Gray was involved with and did quite a bit of work. I don't know David Gray. Maybe some of you do or have heard of him. Also, some of the information I shared tonight is from toy collectors. I want to acknowledge them because they've verified some of this information I'm using in recent discussions, and or they've documented some things. And those toy collectors include, some of these folks are on here tonight, Len Cassier, Wayne Devine, Doug Harke, and Ralph Jolly. So those are the sources I'm quoting. I've known some Lincoln history over the years, but quite frankly, doing this research project this past few weeks, I've learned a lot of things that I didn't know before. And so hopefully some of this may be new information for you folks. I'm going to follow my notes fairly close because I've got information pages all over in front of me. And I try to get this in a chronicle order. I may repeat once in a while here and there, not knowingly, but if I do, it's because I've got information from different sources. So let's first start this history by clarifying the roles between two companies. One is Lincoln Toy Company, which is the brand of the toys, and Lincoln Specialties. And Lincoln Specialties, I'm going to talk about in a moment to make it clear tonight when you hear both Lincoln Toy and Lincoln Specialty. Lincoln Toys of Windsor, Ontario made a large line of pressed steel trucks, tractors, and they even made a Trans-Canada airplane. Interestingly, I've never seen one of these planes, but Len Cassier had mentioned that he has one, and so I wasn't aware of this airplane. Apparently it's very rare. Now, Lincoln Specialties, they're based in Windsor, and they were the distributor, promotion, and marketing arm for this large line of pressed steel toys that were Lincoln Toys, and that was between 1946 and 1958. Now, there's two manufacturing companies that play into this. One was Windsor Steel Products, owned by the Kimberleys, and Elwood Toys, owned by the Elwood family of both Windsor and later Tilbury, Ontario. So these two companies were the primary manufacturers that produced Lincoln Toys. Windsor Steel went out of business in 1958. I'll share those reasons later. And Elwood Toys went out of business, it appears, sometime in the 1960s. However, those two companies' influence on toy design lasted a long time, as some of the trucks that they produced were kept in production by a series of companies long after Elwood and Windsor Steel were out of business. And the toy companies that carried on with some of these toys were known as Little Beaver Toys and Saturn Toys. They produced some of these trucks and toys into the early 70s. And that's something I didn't realize either. Now, first, before I go back into history, I just want to point out, we know from some hard to find company catalogs, and the one I'm citing is from either 1952 or 1953. We know that there was 24 different trucks were made in 3 basic sizes and 2 different cab styles. Plus they made a crane, a power shovel at that time, along with several variations of the Massey Harris 44 tractor, the farm implements that were made, 1 airplane, a toy wheelbarrow, and they even made a doll high chair and swing. For the complete story on the beginning of Lincoln Toys, we need to go to 1946 and the days just after World War II. And again in Windsor, Ontario, to trace the background development of what became Lincoln Specialties Limited and the company that marketed toys that were named Lincoln Toys. The Lincoln Toys were actually designed and manufactured by the two different firms that I've mentioned, Windsor Steel Products and Elwood Metal Products. They were the heart and soul, you might say, of Lincoln Toys in terms of manufacturing. I'm going to talk about both these companies. First, I'm going to talk about Windsor Steel Product. During the Second World War, Ed Kimberly and an older brother, Fred, along with their father, Haven, all located in Windsor, started a company called K Manufacturing. K is spelled K-A-Y. They started that company in 1941 after leaving a partnership, a partnership with a family friend in a company in Windsor called LK Metal. Kimberly's first factory, purchased in 1941, was a small building at 1637 Erie Street East, and that was near the corner of Lincoln and Erie Streets. Interestingly, K Manufacturing received a contract to produce ammunition boxes and fenders for the Canadian Army. To get started, they bought secondhand punch presses and had their own dies made, and the company name was changed from K Manufacturing to Windsor Steel Products in 1942. Among other things, Windsor Steel made portable soft drink coolers, sun visors for cars. With improvements in techniques and a lot of hard work, their production increased to the point they outgrew the first factory. And so they planned a new factory and built a brand new factory at 1701 Shepherd Street in 1943. And thus this become the original home expanded for Lincoln Steel Products. And that factory was used till they were no longer. Now, the idea come up at Windsor Steel with the Kimberleys. It was suggested there might be more profit in both manufacturing their goods and selling their own goods. And with that idea, the owners of Windsor Steel decided to open up a sales outlet in 1946. And that office for that new enterprise was an old factory building near the corner of Lincoln and Erie Street, and hence the name Lincoln Specialties came into being. And again, Lincoln Specialty was the marketing promotion company for these Lincoln toys. In the Windsor City Directory in 1946, Lincoln Specialties was listed as a quote-unquote wholesale hardware specialist. With a slowdown in business after the war, Windsor Steel was looking for new opportunities. And among some of the successful suggestions were to make bicycle baskets and kickstands. Interestingly, with an abundant supply of scrap sheet metal from the war effort left over from the ammunition boxes, making such small-sized items would be ideal to use up this scrap metal. Windsor Steel by this time had their own tool room. They had a lathe, they had a shaper, they had milling machines, and they could make their own dies. So when the idea of a toy was presented, it all came into place. Now, what I found very interesting was that the first toy was actually made out of wood, and it happened to be a Jeep. And I've had this verified with a couple collectors. I've never seen one, was never aware of it. Now, the first steel toy that Lincoln made generally is regarded to be the number 54 repeating all steel cannon, and that appears in the Eaton's fall and winter catalog for 1946, 1947. For our US friends with us, Eaton's and Simpson's and company names you're going to hear would be similar to what Sears was in the US, and Sears was here in Canada as well. Now, these cannons were likely a copy, it's thought, of a similar American-made cannon, but the Canadian ones that were made here had a label on them, decal that read "Made in Canada, Lincoln Specialties, Windsor, Ontario." It's acknowledged that the first major line of toys to be called Lincoln Toys and sold under the Lincoln Specialty Company was actually the series of metal trucks that we know as Lincoln Toys. And they were first produced apparently around 1946. Now those trucks were of two sizes and two different conventional cab designs, and they all bore the early version of the classic Lincoln oval decal that says "Made in Canada Lincoln Toys." The lettering's black, and they're on a gold background, and I have some decals if you're not familiar with them. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's what the decals are like. There's a couple different versions. I may speak more about that later. Everybody see that okay?
Yeah, that's good, Doug.
Yeah, okay. Now, interestingly, truck information, more detail, we're going to leave for maybe a future session. So I'm not going to talk about trucks in great detail, but there is some references to the truck that's an important part of the history. So that's why I mentioned that a bit tonight. Now, interestingly, to add to confusion, there's another two toy companies that play into the history of early Lincoln toys. The origin of some of the early Lincoln toys involves L Cycle toy shops, and also the Elwood toy with the Elwood family. Now, interestingly, there's a directory from 1946. I assume it's a city directory that lists L Cycle shop, and they're listed as being in the toys metal stampings. And at this time, L Cycle shop made a 19-inch fire truck with a familiar cab-over design, and it had a long, simple chassis on it that carried two ladders. So this 19-inch long fire truck was made by L Cycle Shop, and it had decals on it that read L Cycle Shop, Windsor, Ontario. Interestingly, though, Elwood Toys had a fire truck exactly just like it. And they were sold through Lincoln, but it's not known who made this fire truck first, whether it was L Cycle Shop or whether it was Elwood. Interestingly, these guys are all competitors, but what's interesting is they all seem to be kind of working together because they obviously are sharing dies and that sort of thing. Now, the Elwood family in Windsor had Elwood Toys, and a bit about Elwood Toys. The founder, Harry Elwood, started his original Elwood toy line in Windsor about the same time, 1945. This factory was located at 1301 Rossini Boulevard. The first trucks Elwood made were all cab-over type trucks, and they had decals that read either Elwood Products, Windsor, Ontario. The other version said another Elwood toy, Windsor, Canada. And these trucks show up in the Eaton's Fall and Winter catalog for 1945 and 1946. And there's three of these Elwood cab-over truck. One's this fire truck I just mentioned. My wife just found some interesting pictures over here on the side.
It's Eaton's 5051.
I'll see if we can get this up. She just found this 51 catalog of Eaton's. I don't know, can anybody see this? There's this fire truck in there. And you'll see some of the Lincoln toys. Hopefully everybody can see that.
That's perfect.
Okay, everybody get good luck, okay?
Unfortunately, the description's in French.
She just found that. Anyway, thank you, Helka.
Descriptions are in French, though.
I need to acknowledge her source material or I'll be in violation. Anyway, the catalog 46 Simpson catalog had that fire truck, a grain truck, and a dump truck, and they all had wooden wheels. Now, interestingly, the next year, these same trucks now, they had rubber wheels on them, and Elwood had a power steam shovel and a tractor trailer load bed carrier. A fire destroyed the Windsor plant in late 40s, and the Elwood family searched for a new location before finally moving to a town called Tilbury, Ontario. And I think as collectors, we tend to always think of Tilbury, Ontario when we think of Lincoln Toys. And that's fine because that was a very important factory. And Tilbury was 28 miles east of Detroit, Michigan. Now in Tilbury, the Elwoods made auto parts for Ford, and they made a lot of toys. And all those toys were marketed as Lincoln Toys, and some of the decals have Elwood toys on them as well. So Elwood, with their line of trucks, was an important part of this. Now we get involved. We now have Lincoln Toys being made by, as I've mentioned, Windsor Steel Products, Elwood Toys. I reference L Cycle Shop, but interestingly, the truck cab made by L Cycle Shop and Elwood Toys, it's believed may have been made first, this truck cab, or at the same time by an American company called Richmond Toys of Richmond, Michigan. Richmond, I looked it up, is between Detroit and Port Huron, Michigan. The Richmond Toy Company started operations earlier than 1946, but it ceased production after a fire in September 1948, which apparently started in the paint department. It destroyed their building and also destroyed 8,000 metal trucks that were ready for Christmas delivery. The toys made by Richmond Company were available in at least two body styles, a tow truck and a dump truck, the same designs as those used by Elwood and Windsor Steel. So it's interesting, here's four companies, they've got similar products, whether they were sharing dies back and forth or copying one another, I haven't been able to determine that. Now, just a quick mention about truck differences between what Elwood made and what Windsor Steel made, because they both were the major supplier of these Lincoln trucks. The later Elwood designs that were marketed through Lincoln Toys include a cement mixer, a crane truck, self-loading dump, and a telephone truck. All the Elwood Lincoln trucks have the cab over design. So the thing to remember, if you're looking at Lincoln trucks, if they're cab over designs, Elwood made them. And they will indicate, most of them, I believe, if not all, they'll have made by Elwood metal products on them, along with the Lincoln logo. Now, the classic, quote unquote, classic Lincoln conventional truck cabs with fender skirts and a separate grill, they were made by Lincoln Steel Products in Windsor. So that's a basic difference. Although it's one big line, those two manufacturers that was the characteristics of the trucks that they made. For the next 10 years, both Windsor Steel and Elwood Metal Products continued to design and manufacture the whole wide range of sheet metal toys that were marketed as Lincoln Toys. I'm not saying a whole lot about the tractor history because I find very little in my research that talks much about the farm toys, but our next session, I'm going to focus solely on the Lincoln toys that are farm toys, tractors and implements, and variations. Now, interestingly, towards the end of the era of these companies, particularly Windsor Steel and Lincoln Specialties, even though they were successful, unfortunately, despite their successes, both companies fell victim to the unstoppable juggernaut of time. Increased competition over time and unsuccessful bids by Windsor Steel Company to win back automotive contracts they abandoned during the toy boom forced Lincoln Specialties out of business. It basically disappeared in 1958, and the Windsor Steel Product Company did continue on a limited capacity and officially dissolved in late 59. So that was the end of that era. Now the Elwood Company, my research says they ended in the late 50s. However, we know for a fact through toy collectors I've talked to that, and with catalogs, Elwood toys were made into the 1960s. And again, remember, a lot of those truck designs did carry on, as I mentioned earlier tonight, with Little Beaver trucks and Saturn toys. Now, interestingly, this was not the end of the Kimberly's involvement in business. I'm not going to get into it. I got more information I'm not going to share. But the Kimberleys actually were quite successful in business and industry. They had other businesses in the Windsor area in the 40s, and after that, they were quite successful. They also some of them went to the US for a few years and had businesses. So the Kimberleys did carry on in Windsor for quite a number of years. And if you want more on what they were doing, I'll talk about it later. I'm nearing the end of my history lesson, so we have lots of time for questions and discussion. But a couple things I want to mention. It appears, as I stated a moment ago, that Elwood Toys did carry on business. I don't know much about it because they do have catalogs. In fact, Len Caser, who's on tonight, told me a few days ago that he actually has a toy catalog of Elwood toys from the 1960s. Now, some people say the factory in Tilbury is still there. A lot of people wonder where it is or was. The history I found says that the factory burnt in 1986 in Tilbury. So maybe some of you on here tonight may have more comment about it. The other piece of information, just before I conclude, I want to speak to where were a lot of the farm toy tractors made. Well, we know that the Massey 44s were made in Windsor by Windsor Steel Products. That's pretty well documented. We also know that they were made later in Tilbury by the Elwood Toy Company in Tilbury. What I've not verified, nor can I find information on, is whether or not Elwood Toys, when they were in Windsor, whether they were making farm tractors and implements there at that time in Windsor. I don't know. They might have, they may not have. I don't know. Maybe some of you might know. But obviously the farm toys play heavily in the history of Lincoln Toys, but my focus tonight was to basically share history of these companies, who was involved, and I think you can see that the truck obviously had a strong influence in the development and of Lincoln Toys and Lincoln Specialty getting going in the toy business. And whether the farm toys were licensed through Massey Harris. If you're not familiar with what farm toy brands they made, obviously they made a lot of Massey Harris toys. They're all 44 versions, model 44. They made a Cockshut 30. They also made a John Deere A tractor that was similar, I believe, to the Ertl. Maybe Joe might know something about this. I'm not sure, but that Lincoln casting, whether Lincoln cast that or bought them from Ertl, we don't know. We're not sure. But there are some small differences in the casting, like the rivets and the inscription of where it's made between the Ertl toy and the Lincoln. And the Lincoln toy A had different wheels on it. We'll talk more about that with the pictures you're going to see when we do the Lincoln Farm Toys. With that, Doug, I'll leave it at that for questions and discussion and any comments. I'm sure there's a number of you that can add more history into this and comments that I'm not aware of or perhaps failed to share. So Doug, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Well, that's a whole bunch of information that I'm sure many of us didn't realize. So do you know how they went from making steel press trucks into the cast Massey tractors? And when they did that?
No, I don't, Doug. I found literally nothing to date on that. I'm going to be meeting with Ralph Jolly this coming week, and some of those questions, I know Ralph's quite knowledgeable on the Lincoln Farm toys, so maybe I can get some information from him, or again, maybe someone else on here tonight may know answers to that. I don't know what drove that decision to do cast toys, whether they were sourcing, because we know some of the Lincoln toy implements are very similar to similar or the same as Slick toys, and maybe Doug Harke can add to this because I know he's done a lot of background work on this sort of thing. And I don't know, Doug. That's a really good question, but I can't answer it. I could offer some speculation, but I don't want to mislead anybody either.
Okay. Doug Harke, do you have any input on that, as Doug suggests you might have?
Okay, I'm unmuted. First of all, I want to comment, Doug's history of the manufacturing brings back memories during the mid-40s, 1940s, right around the end of World War II. Well, my dad was a store manager of a large general store south of Edmonton in Alberta in Western Canada. It was very difficult to get metal toys, but my dad, through his pull, got me a large metal truck, which I think was one of the trucks you described. It was I think it was a dump truck or a farm truck. And I still remember that because most kids could only get wooden toys. Coming back to the other sources of information, the spreader that Massey used, that Lincoln used, was really the King design. Remember that King made Massey 44s in the United States, made two versions. One was made out of slag, real hard metal, and the other was sand cast. And the spreader that they used was basically the same casting that Lincoln used, was the same casting as the King one. So I don't know whether they sourced castings from them, or the beaters are different and the wheels are different. So my guess is maybe they got the bare metal castings from King and then did the finishing, including their wheels and their beaters. And some of the other implements were related to Slick. Some of the Slick, early Slick implements were actually knockoffs of the arcade cast iron implements, except the Slicks were sand cast aluminum. But coming back to the manufacturing of the Lincoln tractors, if you look at them, they're all sand cast. They did not have any, that is the Masseys, were all sand cast. Because I guess they were relatively easy to do, but of course Joe Ertl would be the expert on commenting on that. Those were designed. The other thing I would like to mention is the first time at the first Canadian Woodstock show, which I was one of the original dealers, that Doug, of course, Doug Vincent started. One of the memories I have is Ralph Jolly had, I think it was either at that first show or the second one, he had a display of 23 versions of the Massey 44 tractors by Lincoln.
Wow. Yeah, I kind of remember that. There was a lot more than anybody realized, I think.
Yes.
Well, we're so happy that Joe's with us tonight, and I know Joe can likely chip in here with some good information, because in the past, Joe and I discussed actually the differences between the Lincoln John Deere A and the Ertl John Deere A, because I had one of each, and Joe shared with me the differences and how to tell. So, Joe, do you want to chip in here with what you want to contribute to the conversation? Because you've got a wealth of knowledge.
we never made any castings for Lincoln.
Right.
And if you probably measure that tractor real close from one end to the other end, the Lincoln one will be maybe a 16th to an 1/8 shorter, which kind of means they copied ours and then they lost the length in the shrink of the aluminum and the plate and the aluminum on the casting itself. So that's pretty much I tell. And you notice that little string pull in the front there. That's something my dad put on our tractors in the early days, because we kids wanted something to pull them around. We were tying strings around the front wheels and through the open engine section. And so he put that on after he built his first tractors. That was a feature. I guess it would be a sales thing today. So,
Well, look,
but
we can look at.
we did not sell any castings to Lincoln. In fact, we never knew who they were. And as far as the early Massey's there, Massey had contacted us one time about making their tractors, and they sent us some dies. And these dies were for what we call a slush mold, where you pour the metal in, then you dump it out, and you let the metal all sit in there, melted maybe for a minute or so, and then dump it out, and you should have a casting. But I can remember those dies because they wouldn't work in the die cast process in the 50s. So my dad took them up to Guttenberg to our cottage on the river, and he used those dies for boat anchors for fishing. So I'm going to go up and look and see if I can find one of those old boat anchors. They weighed about 40 pounds a piece, you know, but back in those days, you used anything you could get a hold of for a boat anchor.
So Joe, do you think that they were the Massey 44 model?
I'm pretty sure they were, yeah. Yeah.
So it could be when those companies went out of business that Doug told us about, they were searching around looking for an alternate source of supply, maybe.
Yes, that could be. It'd be interesting to find out who the foundry was that made those. And you should be able to figure that out somewhere up there, I think, Doug, because there weren't that many sandcast foundries back in 1950 that were pouring aluminum.
Yeah.
Aluminum had just come into being as a space age metal during World War II.
Yeah. I would tend to think that probably they were poured in Windsor would be my best guess. I mean, Windsor's a good sized city, not as big as Detroit, but there was a better chance that would have been done, I would think, originally in Windsor, because Tilbury didn't come till later.
Yes, if you could do some research on aluminum foundries.
Yeah.
Or if you have maybe an alloy company up there, or maybe you've got a good scrap yard that was back in those days that was melting the aluminum. Because that's where we got our aluminum from, was Bloom's Junkyard in Dubuque.
Well, probably those dies came about. Massey tended to own the dies for their toys. For example, they owned the dies for the Rule toys, which they later gave some of those dies to Lincoln when they made some of the combines back in the later 50s. And I don't know whether that was just common to Massey or whether other companies did that.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's open it up for questions and comments from anybody else. Just push your space bar down on your computer if you want to speak. That toggles your microphone on. And so do we have anybody who's got any additional comments about Lincoln? We've got a lot of Lincoln collectors tonight. So let's see if we have any Lincoln people who want to share what they know about the the history of Lincoln, and then we'll go with the questions after that. Do we have any more comments on the history of Lincoln from any of our Lincoln guys?
Well, I got a couple, Doug. If you guys have never seen a Lincoln airplane, there's one version there.
Great.
Or just hold it up a little
And
longer.
There's another version there. And they actually made, the casting is the same, but the paint scheme is different, and they have 6 different paint schemes. That was part of them.
Just hold it up a bit, Bruce. Hold it up in front of the camera a bit more.
Was that based on the DC-3?
That's correct. It is a DC-3, and all of them are marked with TWA on them. And they are close to being the same as what Marks put out, but the Marks has square holes here where the Lincolns have round holes. That's basically the difference. The props and everything are the same as Marks, but the airplane itself is that way. So that's one thing. Here's the box of the first gun, the cannon that Lincoln Specialties put out. I was very fortunate to find that in Southern Ontario many years ago when I first started to collect. So it's, again, almost identical to the Marks cannon that they put out. So there's some difference there. And there's a fire truck from Al's Cycle Shop with the 2 ladders. And a thing that's unique to Al's Cycle Shop are these hubcaps. These big, large chrome brass type of hubcaps were all Al's Cycle Shop trucks, which were, I believe, based on the Richmond trucks that were out of Detroit. So that's my little bit. And the other part that I know is true is a company called Milner Metal Products ran Lincoln or sold Lincoln toys into 1963, and I can document that. And I actually have a box here if you guys want to see one with Milner Metal Products on it. I have that here as well.
Is it Milner? Milner?
Yeah, just hang on. I'll get it for you and you can see it.
Okay.
Had you seen the box on that cannon before, Doug?
No, I've never seen the cannon or that toy. And I'd seen a fire truck one time, Len Casser's display, I believe, is where I saw it. But no, I've never seen the plane or cannon till tonight. Thanks, Bruce. That's special to see those toys.
Doug, can I say something?
Sure, go ahead.
If you want to see a bigger picture of what Bruce is showing, you have to click pin on your own screen. Each person has to click pin, and then Bruce will be bigger.
Yes, or else you can go on to speaker view in the top right corner as well. That'll show the person who's speaking. So as long as it's Bruce doing the speaking, you'll see it larger there as well.
Yeah, well, if you pin him, you'll see him for sure.
Yeah.
So there's the box, the Lincoln box, and then there's Milner Metal Products, which was both in Windsor and Tilbury. Now I understand the connection is this guy Milner was a foreman or somebody high up in the company. And when Kimberly's went out of business or let it go, he bought everything and started up, and then it led to Little Beaver and Saturn. I understand. Now, I stand to be corrected. It's a complicated story, that's for sure. And Doug's, so far so good, has got it correct as far as I understand it as well.
Good.
Okay.
Bruce, we're putting together a little bit of a PowerPoint slideshow of photos in the next session 2 weeks from tonight. Would you be able to take photos of those that you shared with us and send them to me so we can include them in the PowerPoint show?
Sure, just let me know whatever you would think you want.
What you
and,
showed us, everything that you showed us, maybe two or three of each, and we'll pick the best ones.
Okay. Now, I guess another question for Doug is, where did they make the sleeper, what we call the extended cab or sleeper cab trucks?
I don't know. I've got some more truck info here. I've been through it. I don't recall seeing anything about that extended cab sleeper, but let me just look at my truck notes. I mean, if you want more detail on some of these trucks, I can share it right now. Or I just, I didn't want to overuse my presentation time, so we didn't have time for discussions. But at this point, I can't answer that question about that sleeper truck or the extended. I don't know. We may have to talk. I wish Len Casser, I guess he's on a cell phone apparently, Helen said, but I don't know if he can hear us or not, but he's muted, but he might know. And Len is very knowledgeable on trucks. And what I may do is, I've got to arrange it, but I may talk further with Len on that. So I'm going to note that question and see if we can find any information out on that. Basically, I don't know, Bruce. Sorry.
That's fine.
Okay, so do we have anybody else who has any thoughts? I know Helen has some Lincoln stuff, and Len, of course, isn't able to talk with us. Any other comments on Lincoln history?
Well, Doug, I don't know if anybody like Bruce would be able to show you the difference in the two styles of the grill, because that depended on the time frame. There were two, one had a Lincoln grill that was separate and the other one was a Chevron grill, I believe. I don't know, is Bruce still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. There's actually, I have 4 different variations of the Lincoln grill, and just real quick, there's the second variation, what they call the Chevron grill, which doesn't have the removable one. The first version has vertical grills, and it's not here in front of me, or I'd show you. And then they went to what they call the this style here, which I call a bug eye grill, meaning that these parts stick out.
Oh,
and then in the later versions, they went to an indented grill, which is this one here. Which is this one here, which is quite a bit different. And this little piece here as well is different on the other truck as well. So that's kind of the variations that I have anyway. But every time you try and figure something out, it changes. So that's what I have as part of grills.
Good. Well, thank you so much,
Thank
Bruce,
you.
for sharing that. So any questions? If so, just hit your space bar and turn your mic on and go ahead.
Wasn't there some relation between the Marx trucks in the United States and some of the later Lincoln trucks?
I'll answer that. Not that I know of, but there are some similarities. There's no doubt about that. There's also the trailer, and I don't have one in front of me, is along the same lines as the Wyandotte back cab style. So yeah, there is some similarities. That is for sure. So there's one other little part to the story too. There's a company called Bates and Bodius that was in Detroit area, Michigan area too, that made almost identical cabs to the Lincoln. And we don't know what the story of them were, that they were at the same time as Richmond, or whether they came before and then Richmond bought the dies and then somebody snuck across after the factory burned and got the dies and brought them back to Canada. I don't know what that difference was, or how they play into the whole Lincoln history story.
So were all Lincoln toys made in the Windsor, Tilbury area? Were they ever in the US at any point, or they were always in the Lincoln business in Windsor and Tilbury areas?
Yep. The Americans don't really recognize Lincoln toys.
Okay.
I think we have some Americans watching us. Is that the case?
Well, we've got people like me who are hybrid, who grew up in Canada and then went to the United
When I
States.
go to toy shows in the States, they don't seem to know too much about Lincoln.
Oh, no, they don't.
No.
Doug, to your question, I couldn't find anything in any research or the information I had that suggested Lincoln Toys made toys anywhere in the US. It looks like it was a wholly owned, operated Canadian company with involvement from these different factories manufacturers I discussed.
Okay.
I think there is a greater appreciation and awareness of Lincoln Toys in the US compared to years ago. That's just my comment, but yeah, there's certainly a lot of interest here in Ontario and Canada. Years ago, we had an old guy, he's long gone now, that made Lincoln parts for us for seats, steering wheels, fenders for the farm tractors, air cleaner mufflers. He made truck grills for us, what we call the large and the small truck grills. Doug Devine's on here tonight. He sold all kinds of those parts for us too when we're at toy shows. And we kind of miss having those parts, but we sold a pile of those parts over the years. So there's obviously a lot of Lincoln toys out there. What I've always found amazing is it's really difficult to find good original close to mint or mint Lincoln toys. These toys were played with.
Okay, any other questions from anybody on what we've talked about tonight? Okay.
All right. It's not so much Lincoln, but it's about all the different toy industries that got started after the war. There's also Tonka here. Now, Tonka, I can see similarities in the Tonka along with the Lincoln trucks, which I've never really realized before. But I'm wondering who copied who in all this stuff.
Mhm.
We see my dad's John Deere getting copied. I know he didn't copy it from down here, but he did copy the original arcade toys. You know, the first Alice Chalmers and that was an arcade cast iron toy. And
Yeah, they're
I guess
going back to the John Deere A that your dad did. They made some John Deere A's that were very similar to your first A's with the cast wheels. They made them in Saskatchewan apparently, and a few of us have those. They're actually pretty crude.
Yeah. The first John Deere's that Dad made with the man on it also was the arcade A.
Yeah.
So except it had metal wheels. But it's surprising then also, I guess, the Massey implements of that were kind of copied after what the old Lansing toys, which is called Slick toys.
Yep.
Mhm.
I don't know who copied who, but then I think Carter copied them for Eska so Eska could sell them. So, you know, I used to think these guys were all geniuses, but they're all copying each other. So anyway, it's an interesting industry, and it's surprising it all started at the same time after World War II. And the thing back then was arcade got out of the toys because they had more lucrative things in making they discovered they were building the bomb sites for the B-24 bombers. And that was the type of stuff they went into, and they never went back into the toys. And then, of course, during the Depression, it was a sewing machine company with Vindex that started making toys because they couldn't sell any sewing machines, so they sold toys. So,
Oh, interesting. Lots of interesting history. Well, plan is that 2 weeks from tonight, Doug is going to send me a bunch of photos, which I'll put into a PowerPoint, and then he will go through and do a PowerPoint presentation with a lot of photos covering the products that we've talked about tonight. And of course, there'll be lots on the Massey 44 tractor and the implements to share with you then. So it's great to have a good turnout, and thank you so much to Doug Dan for all of your research and all of your cadre of sources that are online tonight. We got a lot of expertise and history about Lincoln Online just with our own little group. And of course, the icing on the cake was to have Joe here to share his involvement and what he knows from years gone by. So thank you, Joe, for taking the time to join us. And so as I said, the plan 2 weeks tonight is to have a slideshow of many of the Lincoln products, which we'll continue on with. And then as Doug alluded, we're hoping that maybe we might have a third Lincoln session, specifically more details on the trucks. And I know Doug is going to reach out to some people and see if we can do that. So if there's no other comments, we'll thank everyone for coming, and we hope that you found this worthwhile. I did record this session, so it'll be on the Ontario Farm Toy Collectors Facebook page in the next day or two, and we can refer to that in the future, or any other friends who may want to see it who missed tonight, hopefully can get to watch the archive video. So if there's nothing else, thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay,